This is the S2G podcast, where we share conversations that help us understand how to scale the food, agriculture, oceans, and energy transitions. I'm your host, Tanya Backritzes. In this episode, Rishad Tobaccowala shares his frameworks for how business leaders can navigate and capitalize on the rapidly evolving workplace. As a reminder, this content is for informational purposes only. It should not be taken as legal, business, tax, or investment advice, or be used to evaluate any investment or security, and is not directed at any investor or potential investor in any investment vehicle sponsored by S2G. Investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. Specific companies mentioned in this podcast are for educational purposes and should not be construed as an endorsement of any kind. Please note that S2G may maintain investments in some of the companies discussed on this podcast. For more important information, please see s2gventures.com/disclosures. Even 5 years ago, very few people would have predicted what work would look like today. So much has changed, from how and where we work to what we expect from our managers and employees, how we think about work-life balance, and what we demand from our jobs. Rishad Tobaccowala is one person who did anticipate this tremendous shift and is thinking critically and prolifically about how everyone from CEOs to managers and employees should equip themselves to meet the moment. Rishad is the former global strategist and chief growth officer of the 100,000 plus person Publicis Groupe, and today he is an author, speaker, advisor, and host of the What Next podcast. We were lucky to have Rishad speak to our portfolio companies on the first day of this year's annual S2G Summit. His research and comprehensive thinking on the future of work is applicable for all company leaders, so Rishad agreed to sit down with Chuck Templeton for a conversation that we now get to share with you. In this episode, Rishad discusses the evolution of work, the biggest trends influencing how we work today, advice for leaders on what to prioritize, how AI will impact jobs, and why he believes that despite the challenges, these are the good old days. I hope you enjoy this expansive and constructive conversation about the future of work.
I'm super excited to be here with Rishad. You've had an amazing career, and you write extensively and talk extensively about the future of work, which I think is such a critical thing right now. And as we think about how do we engage with our entrepreneurs and help our portfolio CEOs really grow their business, it's such an important consideration since it is changing so fast. And so super excited to have you here today. Rishad, if you could just introduce yourself, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background and how you got to this point.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. So I'm Rishad Tobaccowala, and today I spend my time helping people see, think, and feel differently about how to either grow themselves, their teams, or their business. I began my career after getting a degree in mathematics in India and an MBA from the University of Chicago at a company called Leo Burnett, the advertising agency. And I spent 37 years at either Leo Burnett, companies they spun off, or the company that bought Leo Burnett, called the Publicis Groupe. And in those 37 years, I worked globally across every component of creative, media, digital strategy, and growth. For the final 5 years of being a full-time employee there, I ran strategy and growth and was on the board, including being involved in big acquisitions like Sapient and Epsilon. And 5 years ago, next month, I started Career 2.0, where I write books, do a podcast like this. I speak, as I will tomorrow at your event, and I advise companies from private equity to large companies to small startups.
And so how did you get your start? When was the first time you started talking about the future of work and how people engage with technology? Was there a particular event that caused you to do that? Or
There were three different events that occurred. The first one was a long time ago in a place far away. The first laptop computers started coming out. And at that time, I was launching a digital agency. And I built a case that every single person in my company should be given a laptop, which are far more expensive than desktops, regardless of title. And they should be given a Nokia phone. In those days, that was the state-of-the-art phone. And for those who wanted, also a BlackBerry. And everyone said, those are massively expensive. why do you want that? And I said, because I'm trying to get people to recognize that they're world-class, and unless they have world-class technology, they won't feel world-class. But what I realized was it significantly enhanced productivity, because now my people were actually working all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in the old days, you couldn't work if you left home. And now they could be anywhere and everywhere. And while they were working, they felt empowered and special. So I began to say, hey, work isn't necessarily just in the office. There's something going on. So that was the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second was obviously when COVID happened, just before COVID, when I started this second career. And I began to realize that while I was working from home versus working from an office, my productivity hadn't changed. And I wasn't feeling lonely at all because I would go meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, could there be something strange about the way we were working? And could it be that we were working in 2019 using 2000 technology and not 2018 technology?
Mm-hmm.
And then when COVID happened, which is the third thing, we began to realize actually we had been working in the prehistoric ages. And that made me think about what's the implications of work. And that eventually led to my next book, which originally began thinking about it as what's the future of work with place, and then recognizing that place was only a small part of the future of work.
To lay the groundwork for the conversation, Rishad shared his perspective on how our relationship with work has evolved over the years.
So the way to think about it is we have entered what I believe is the third phase of work, talent, operations, and all those areas I write about. We're in what I call phase 3. So let me begin with phase 1.
Yeah, that'd be great. Start from the beginning.
So phase 1 is all of us joined a company and looked at work for 3 things. And those 3 things were money, fame, and power.
Money, fame, and power. Okay.
And for younger people, fame might be recognition and power might be autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what drove most people. Then about 20 years ago, there was a next set of 3 things that happened. And that next thing was a lot of people stayed in companies even if someone offered them more money, fame, or power. And usually you switch a company through your own volition if someone gives you more money, fame, and power. But people were not necessarily switching or sometimes going to other places which were not necessarily just money, fame, and power. And those were the second set, which is purpose, values, and connections.
Values and connections. Okay.
And that is, do I have a sense of purpose in what I do? And this could happen either for people who had already made lots of money and said, what do I do with the rest of my life? Or other people who said, I am making a lot of money, but I'm not feeling fulfilled.
What was the reason why this shift from phase 1 to phase 2 happened?
There were a couple of things. The first, I think, the standard of living went up over the lots and lots of time. And then the other one was that the various movements about feminism, right? About multiculturalism, climate change.
So these were cultural things.
These were cultural things that were happening. And so people were saying, what am I doing to a great extent?
Okay.
And so what's the purpose of what I do?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I align with the values of my company? There were a lot of implosions. Enron, Arthur Andersen, if you remember those.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm working for a company that actually is like crooked. So that was the values. And then the other is connections, which is, do I feel connected to my clients, to my employees, to my bosses? When you had a certain amount of money, fame, and power, you began to think about purpose, values, and connections. And that was phase 2. Now, I'm not saying that money, fame, and power is not important, but you often stay for more than that. And then I began to see a third thing, which became very clear post-COVID. So it was already there, but sometimes you have to have, as they say,
flashlight on it.
Flashlight on it.
Yeah.
And as Warren Buffett says, when the tide is low, people who aren't wearing any swimming trunks.
Yeah.
So you need to see that. And those 3 were freedom, story, and growth.
Was there something that caused this shift?
Yes.
So culture caused the first one.
The culture caused the first one. And I believe what caused the second one was a combination of 2 things happening at the same time. technology getting to a particular place, and including like marketplaces and a whole bunch of other stuff, and the emotional impact of COVID. And the emotional impact of COVID, and I don't think people realize that for 2 years, we actually were worried about things like, can we get enough Lysol? Who will deliver our food? People were beginning to say, what's life all about? More than 1 million people died. The big shift that happened was the question that we had been asking was, how do I fit life into my work?
Okay.
That became, how do I fit work into my life? And technology had come to a place which enabled certain things, like, hey, by the way, you can do different things to make a career. For instance, one of the statistics I have in my new book is in the US, 66% of Gen Z who have a full-time job have a side hustle or side gig with which they make money. A lot of people are doing it to make ends meet. A second group of people are doing it because that is truly what they want to do in life. And a third is they're doing it to build a skill set to maximize optionality. One of the other things that happened during the COVID days is many companies laid off a lot of people and stopped paying them. And another group of people, basically, which were the frontline workers, began to realize that suddenly they were very appreciated, but they continued to be underpaid for what they were doing, taking risks. So a lot of people basically said, I have to take care of myself. And one way I can take care of myself is I'm going to work for the man or the woman, but I'm also going to work for myself. Mm-hmm. And this is a global phenomenon, which I found fantastically amazing. I thought this was like, okay, this is the United States, 66% of Gen Z are working for themselves. That number is about 50% in Asia. And so there's this big mindset shift that occurred. And that led to give me some freedom to do what I want. The other one is, when I was growing up, I kept figuring out how I fit into the Leo Burnett story. Mm-hmm. Today, the people who work at Leo Burnett want to know, how does Leo Burnett fit into their story? Companies last a long time, but companies in the Fortune 500 last about 10, 15 years.
Mm-hmm. It's gotten faster, certainly.
It's got faster. So if you're going to have a 45-year career and companies are going to last 10, 15 years, you should be asking, really, how does these things fit into my story? Because my story is deeper and broader and longer than theirs. Yep. So that was the freedom and story. But the most important thing, and the one that I would suggest to all your listeners to focus on, is growth, which is what people were looking at is, how do I grow? Not just how does my company grow, but how do I grow?
Personal growth.
Personal growth, skill growth, career growth, financial growth, and everything. Okay. And so where I get people to unite, management and talent, is around growth. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, you as a company want to grow. You want to grow market share, grow ROI, grow stock price, grow valuation, grow yourself. So let's agree on the growth part. And then once people focus on growth, they begin to realize these other 8 things can help growth.
This brings us to today. Employees are looking for freedom, story, and growth, in addition to all the other things a job can provide. Rishad says these elements should feature prominently as companies consider their value proposition to current or prospective employees. At the same time, there are a number of trends that are impacting all aspects of businesses and society that leaders should take into account.
So let's go macro. So you described 4 major shifts that are impacting society and business. Can you bring up those 4 shifts and talk a minute about them?
Yes. So the future is very hard to tell. If we knew for sure what the future was, we wouldn't be here. We'd be on a beach somewhere. Right? But what I've understood over time is underlying trends are less hard to tell. You can actually tell some underlying trends. And so a key part of when I advise companies or leaders, I say, you know what? You should make sure that you align your company with future trends. And there are some key shifts taking place. And can you make sure that you, your career, your company, and your talent are set up for those shifts? And the 4 shifts are, one is a power shift. And there are three types of power shift. One is we're moving from a unipolar to a multipolar world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that globalization is dead. It's just globalization is taking a different shape, with China, India, and other people being extremely important. The second one is power is shifting from larger companies to smaller companies. Like in the United States, all the net new jobs created between 2020 March and 2023 March were in companies of less than 500 people. And one of the reasons is technology enables smaller companies to do better. And then the third shift is shift from management to talent.
Okay.
And where people are basically asking, are you just allocating, delegating, and managing me? Or are you creating, building, mentoring, and growing me?
Mm-hmm.
Those are those three shifts in power, which is large to small, west to east, and management to talent.
Okay.
The second shift are demographic. If you exclude Africa, the world's population is in decline, and the world's population is aging dramatically. A third of Japan is already over 60 years old. And the only demographic that's really growing in the US is over 55. And one of the key things really is you have an aging population, you have a declining population. All of that basically what I call demographic shifts. And then you have a very strange bifurcated mindset. And now this one is an American number. So baby boomers have approximately 55 to 65% of America's wealth. And
they're not spending it, right? They've already done all their spending. They bought their house, their cars, all that stuff.
And they're not moving out from their big homes or anything of the sort. Right?
Yep.
So that's one. And having done relatively well, 68 to 70% of us believe in capitalism. So now you come to Gen Z. 22% of Gen Z believe in capitalism. And it's for a variety of reasons. One is I come out with college with major debt. I can't afford to even buy a car, forget about a home. Climate change is happening. I'm losing my job from time to time. What sort of system is this that I think is really good? Mindset shift is this whole idea of one is from old and younger believing differently, and then the one which is no longer am I going to figure out how do I fit my life into work. I've got to figure out work into life. And the last and the fourth one is technology. And I try to remind people that, of course, technology is important, but technology is a tool that enables better humans and better living and better life. It's not technology doesn't exist for technology's sake. So now, obviously, today, the big thing is AI, which is a huge part of the future of technology. But in addition to AI, there are other things. And I describe AI as data connected to data, which is applied statistics. But there are much faster connections like 5G, which are prevalent and will be required for a lot of climate and energy and other monitoring. And then new ways of connecting. Voice is one. I call it XR, AR, VR, spatial computing. And then finally, and this is another one that people are underestimating, trust has broken down all over the place. And when trust breaks down, and AI further makes fake things possible, and so that's blockchain. So I expect blockchain and AI actually are very linked, but people don't realize that. How do you trust the AI stuff is you need a ledger of trust. So if you combine all of those, which is blockchain, XR, 5G, and AI, you have massive technological gains or advantages or inventions built on changing demographics, changing power shifts, and changing mind shifts. And that is why a lot of people feel very confused with what's going on around the world. Because they try to find one single silver bullet. And this is basically
a combination
of things. And once you begin to understand that these are the key driving forces, then management can decide, and leaders and entrepreneurs can decide how to allocate their mind and their capital to solving which of these problems.
So these trends that are emerging right now. So if I'm an entrepreneur or I'm a CEO of a company or even senior leadership in a company, how does that now translate into how I engage with my employees? Is it how you hire them? Is it the culture you bring? Is it the technology? How do you start to engage with your people directly?
So I believe that there are 4 keys for every entrepreneur, every leader, every manager to think about. And then they can decide which components of these 4 they want to use. The first is extremely important, is to recognize that their company does not invent, their company does not transform, their company does not change. People do.
Okay.
And people will only change if you let them know why it's good for them, you incentivize them, and you train them. So when someone basically says, I've got a transformation agenda, I said, that's really cool. And that usually requires strategy, M&A, and a reorg. But can you also please pay attention to incentives, training, and alignment? Otherwise, it won't work.
Yeah.
So if an entrepreneur wants to build something new, they have to bring people along. That's one. The second thing that I think they need to focus on is in a world of AI, and what AI is going to do is just like better and better processors made the cost of computing close to free, and the internet made data and information distribution free.
Well, storage.
And storage free.
Yep.
I think what AI is going to do is it's going to make knowledge free. And so if that is true, it's a huge thing for every business. But now this comes to the crux of it. I believe that while AI is going to be critical, for most people, it's not going to be differentiation. It's going to be like electricity. You aren't going to be operating without having AI and a whole bunch of other stuff, but your strategy can't be AI.
Yeah.
It's like your strategy is electricity. I got lights, you got lights, now what?
Yeah.
Unless you're an electric company, it doesn't make sense. Therefore, the future is about AI plus HI.
Okay.
And HI is human insight, human intelligence, human intuition. Third is how do you hire and how do you grow people? Because that is a big part of any company. As entrepreneurs grow, as they grow their companies, how do they find the right partners, the right people, both inside, outside? And there I basically say, look for the 6 C's. So I've written a piece called How to Future-Proof Ourselves, because as an aging person, I have to figure out how to future-proof myself.
Yeah.
And if you remember 4 or 5 years ago, even as early as 4 or 5 years ago, people always said, what should my kids study? And you would always hear Mandarin and code.
Yep.
Remember that?
I had those same comments about my kids too.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So now, as you probably know, the latest Samsung phones, and hopefully Apple will have them soon, the latest Samsung phones do real-time translation from Mandarin to English and English to Mandarin using AI.
Yep.
Okay. So that doesn't seem to be very important. I'm speaking to a lot of engineers because I come from India and I do some courses over the phone, over video in India. And the people who are now increasingly attending my thing and paying a lot of attention are engineers. And it's a company called Cognitive AI, which has a new thing called Devin, which is a full-time programmer. It's an AI programmer that works like an engineer. And there's an entire thing like, oh my God, this stuff is writing itself. And so suddenly, I'm not saying knowing code and knowing Mandarin is not good, but it's no longer essential in an age of AI. So what is essential in an age of AI? And that's what I thought about. These are the 6 C's. The first is cognition. Spend an hour a day learning. This world is moving so fast that if you aren't learning, you're falling behind. The second one is creativity, which is connecting dots in new ways, which anyway entrepreneurs and inventors do, but you have to create dots in new ways. The third one is curiosity, because AI and a lot of the modern stuff looks backwards. It feeds on what's come in the past. It doesn't look forward.
Yeah.
So if you have curiosity, creativity, and cognition, you are set up. And therefore, I hire for creativity, cognition, and curiosity.
So you put these in your hire, or you would recommend companies put these in their hiring
In the
practice?
hiring
How
thing.
do they think about it? Okay,
Which is ask questions about curiosity, creativity, and cognition. But companies aren't entrepreneurs by themselves. Companies are cultural ecosystems and a whole bunch of other stuff. So the next 3 are how do you work with other people? One of those happened to be collaboration. But increasingly, you're not just going to collaborate with other people, but you're going to collaborate with agents and machines.
Yep.
So how do you collaborate with next generation technology as a human being and collaborate with people? Second is convincing, which is if everybody has the same access to knowledge/intelligence, what will differentiate us is how do we tell our stories and how do we convince people? And then the last one is very old school. I believe that companies should invest in, and especially leaders should invest in themselves, but also their teams, in communication skills, writing and speaking. So those are the 6 C's. So creativity, curiosity, and cognition.
Yep.
And then convincing, collaboration, and communication.
The next element that Rishad says leaders should be thinking about and prioritizing today is culture.
Eventually, a company is culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to believe that culture are 4 key things. And great cultures have all these 4. The first one is excellence. Great cultures are cultures of excellence. The second one is a growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And the best example is what Satya Nadella did in Microsoft over the last 10 years, is he basically took them from a know-it-all mindset to a growth mindset. And he basically said, we're going to be open. We're not going to blame anybody. We're going to reinvent our business. And we're going to no longer see the world through windows. A third one is communication internally and externally, because you have to tell stories in this particular world to be successful. A culture is a story. So if you listen to whether it's the Apple story, the Louis Vuitton story, you got to have a story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives you context.
It gives you context.
Exactly,
where we come from, where are we going, why do we do what we did? And then the last one is the ability to call out the turd on the table.
Okay.
So the great cultures sit around and sometimes they say this thing that's brown and moist in the middle of the table that we all think is a brownie is actually a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
A culture where people don't say, hey, we got a problem before it's too late. And if you now look at what happened at Wells Fargo or at Boeing or any of these places, the companies knew exactly what was going on, but it was a culture where people weren't allowed to speak up. So these cultures are really about excellence, growth mindset, storytelling, and the ability to call out the turd on the table. Yeah. And they're all doable. Each company, each leader, each industry can decide how to apply it. You don't have to go to school for a PhD to do this.
And so as we get a little bit more tactical in that, how do CEOs, because they look at a framework like this, because I'm a huge framework guy, that's why I like all your content. How does a CEO think about if they're going to try and do these 4 steps in culture, excellence, growth, storytelling, and the turd on the table? Is it their responsibility? Do they bring in a head of turd on the table identifying?
No, so I would say that it starts from them primarily, because initially they are the company or they have a few people. I've obviously not built the type of companies that S2G companies are, but I've built them in services industry, which are a bit different. But I always remember the first 10 hires make the culture of a company. Because each time you're hiring someone, it's the first 10%, the next 10%. And so I always be very careful about the first 10 to 15 people and be unfortunately quite stern about kicking out people who aren't right. Because if you start with bad seeds, the weeding is really hard later.
Yeah.
So I would say that's one. Number 2 is to make it a point to tell people about how important it is to take time to learn and grow themselves and repot themselves. And I remind people that Bill Gates, to this day, still has his think weeks. He takes a week off every X months. When Jeff Bezos was running Amazon, he wouldn't go to work till 10 o'clock. He would spend time in the morning learning and reading. Invest in time and learning for yourself. But as importantly, invest in education and training for your people. That should be a learning mindset.
One of the things that we see as entrepreneurs, when you're a company of one, you've got to work in the business. You've got to do the stuff all day long that needs to get done. If trash needs to be taken out, if email needs to be set up, you're the person that does it, right? But as a company grows, and oftentimes we see anywhere between 15 and 30 employees, you really shift the majority of your time from working, what we say, in the business to working on the business.
Yes.
How do you think about, because culture here, you've got to be the one helping to set the standards, the frameworks, that kind of stuff.
So I would say that there are 3 stages. Again, I've not done them in this field, but I've started companies 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And there's stage 1 to 15, 15 to 75,
Okay.
and then 75 plus.
Yeah. I directionally agree with that
Right.
same sort of thing too.
And the 1 to 15 is a very critical place where everybody does pretty much everything. And even though people have roles, people jump into doing other stuff. And everybody knows each other.
There's no such thing as that's not my job.
That's not my job. It's everybody's job.
Yep.
15 to 75, everybody still knows each other, but people now actually have jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You've managed to actually get a true finance person.
Yep.
You've actually got maybe even a true HR person, etc. After 75, you don't actually know people as much. And so what begins to happen is from 0 to 15, you don't have to worry that much. Everyone's doing everything.
Mm-hmm.
From 15 to 75, you need to start having some area specialists, but the area specialists need to work very closely with each other because you're still forming. After 75, what you want to basically do is make sure that people have quote unquote swim lanes, but recognize that you're all in the same pool. What people often do post 75 is they have swim lanes that make them all think that they're in different pools.
In their own pools, yeah.
Right? And that means if there's a problem in one pool, the other people don't realize it, and they're actually in the same pool.
Yeah.
And so blood from one pool comes to the other one.
So I've always been curious about this, and I've heard different people talk about it. So in AI, will AI in most workplaces reduce the number of people needed to do a project, or will it expand the work that these people can do? Are most companies going to embrace AI to try and save money on people, or are they going to try and get their people to be able to be more productive with the same amount of?
So it's hard to tell, but I suspect this is what's likely to happen. So I've studied all past technology shifts, and it has led to net new employment.
Yeah.
But there are 2 things that are different about this. One is this is the first time that something is happening to the white-collar industry versus the blue-collar industry. This is coming after lawyers and radiologists and a whole bunch of other people who are already highly paid and highly skilled.
Yeah.
The second one is the rate of advancement is right now twice as fast as Moore's law. So the AI is doubling in capability every 9 months. People are saying 5 to 14, so I've just split the difference and said 9 months. And as a result, it's getting so good in so many fields that people might basically say, why do I have all these people? To a great extent. But assuming that's true, then I think what's going to happen is there's going to be initially a much bigger loss of jobs than what most people think. So I think the first thing that's going to come is there's going to be an efficiency play. Then there will be the effectiveness play. And I think the effectiveness play is much bigger than the efficiency play. But I think they're going to be in 2 different playgrounds. I think for humans, the play is going to be efficiency. For innovation, technology, and breakthroughs is where the effectiveness is going to be. AI plus biotech, AI plus energy, AI plus change. Okay, massive. In fact, in my book, I talk about job shifting across industries because, in effect, there'll be the new AI industries. I think in existing industries, there'll be fewer jobs, but there'll be massive new industries formed. What I don't know is how fast those will create jobs, is where the twist is. The long answer of basically saying it's much more complex than I thought in the past because of these nuances. Which to me goes back to one of your earlier things about spending an hour a day learning and, again, digging into these new things that sort of challenge or put you in an uncomfortable position to be able to see what's happening around you. It is. And I would say to every entrepreneur, because I think entrepreneurs are storytellers. They start with a blank sheet of paper and then they tell a story. I would ask every entrepreneur once a year to bring their team together and say, if we were to start our company all over again, what would we do? And I think that's the real challenge in this modern world. I think technology has changed so much that we are going to basically see completely new ways of doing business. And even a company that launched 3-4 years ago might have some outdated stuff. Yeah. We think we see it here, whereas in our industry, as an example, 4, 5, 6 years ago, a lot of the question was, can we make casein without the cow type of thing, as an example, right?
And we've proven we can do that. And now it's how are we doing it, right? And how are we doing it in ways that are, back then it was like building a big facility and I've got to raise 9 figures to do that. And now it's, okay, great. Now I know how to do it. Now how am I figuring out how to do it as cheap as possible? The whole mindset as to how it's happening has changed. So AI is coming on board. We've talked about these companies having to make shifts sooner or faster. Lots of different work styles that are changing and stuff. So is the world getting better or is the world getting worse, in your opinion, from the future of work and people?
My basic belief is that there's nothing to fear but the headlines. And that if you read the headlines or watch the headlines, TikTok the headlines, which is what most people do today, you would see a dystopian, troubled, polarized, declining world with a lot of people wanting to go back to 1950 or 1920 or whatever it is. And I remind people, okay, just pause for a second and ask, regardless of your industry, regardless of where you are, for most people, if the question was, are you better off today versus 35 years ago? The answer would be probably better off today. If you're anywhere in the world of agriculture and energy, what is possible today versus 35 years ago is absolutely amazing. So I always tell people, these are the good old days. Stop basically looking backwards. The future is bright.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous opportunity. The world I live in is the world of innovation and the world of making the world a better place. And we often think about internally that there's a massive shift towards the best thing that happens to an entrepreneur is a constraint. Frankly, and if they have a constraint, they can work around it and making things better.
Absolutely. And this AI stuff, among other things, is going to be enabling billions of people to do stuff that they could never have done before, including, and one of the things in teaching and education, there's one thing every teacher and educator will tell you. Personalized education is the very best. And for the first time, you can see that with Khan Academy and a bunch of other places, we're going to get it.
Yeah.
And so my whole thing is, I think we're going to upgrade the mental operating system of the whole world over the next decade.
Yeah, I agree. Rishad, thank you very much for your time today. This was a super engaging conversation. And can you remind the audience of blogs, your podcast?
Again, thanks for inviting me. So my Substack or my blog is called The Future Does Not Fit in the Containers of the Past, and it's at rishad.substack.com, and it's completely free. To find my podcast, which is called What Next, you type in What Next in Publicis Groupe. It's available on every platform, and it's also completely free. My book is called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data, and that's available everywhere. And my new book, which will come out in January, is Rethinking Work.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate your time today, and so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Chuck. Bye-bye.
It was a privilege being able to spend this time with Rishad and consider how we can better navigate these rapidly evolving work environments and trends. For leaders, thinking critically about workplace design, employee engagement, and the incorporation of new technologies into workflows will be essential for scaling companies. Our team benefited from discussing the future of work, and we hope you took some points of inspiration away as well. Over the next few weeks, we'll continue to share conversations from our annual summit. Thank you for tuning in to the S2G podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, or share it with a friend. For more information or to connect with us, check out s2gventures.com.